Welcome back to A History of Promise, our survey of Old Testament history from the time of Abraham going through the destruction of the Second Temple period, and we are on lesson 8. Israel and the kingdom of Judah with the two kings. Now, this is going to be kind of tricky because we're essentially going to be looking at two timelines simultaneously. So we're going to be looking at the events happening concurrently. So the timeline itself is going to be the same, but we're going to be having the king of Judah on one side, the king of Israel on the other side, and sometimes, well, because kings die at different times or regimes change at different times, sometimes names will change, but others will stay the same. So we're in for a fun ride on this one. So last time we ended looking at the war between Abijah and Jeroboam, that sort of inner war between Judah and Israel, where Judah actually managed to take several border cities, including Bethel, during that war, even though Israel vastly outnumbered Judah in that. And at that point, after that, the reign of Abijah actually comes to an end. He had a very short reign of 2 years, and now we're going to be moving into the reign of Asa, depending on the pronunciation of it. But before we go into that, because we're going to be dealing with a lot of dates, just one thing that I've mentioned before, it's worth repeating, there's going to be issues in the timeline. Because some kings start ruling in dates where the previous king is actually still ruling, and other issues like that. So we're going to have nine 869 BC. Remember, we're in BC, so the years actually count down as we go through that. And at least what the beginning of his reign is specifically put in 1 Kings 15, verses 9 through 11 in the ESV, which says, in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah, and he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother name was Maacah, and the daughter of, fun names, Abishalom. And Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as David his father had done. That's the basic introduction that you're going to have to every king of Israel, every king of Judah, is going to be, in the year of this king's reign, so the king of the other kingdom, so-and-so became king. So they always play back and forth off of each other. And in Scripture, we have 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. These are actually the history books, the chronicles of the kings of Israel and of Judah. So we're going to be constantly bouncing back and forth between Kings and Chronicles in this, so we can actually look at the various kings from the different perspectives, from one side versus the other. Because Asa in 2nd Chronicles 14 is painted like this, with his death, whereas Kings is where we hear about the beginning of his reign. 2nd Chronicles is his death. Is the death of Abijah, his predecessor, where it says, Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Asa his son reigned in his place. In the days the land had rest for 10 years. And Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He took away the foreign altars, He took away the foreign altars and the high places, and broke down the pillars, and cut down the Asherim, and commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to keep the law and the commandment. He also took out all the cities of Judah, the high places and the incense altars, and the kingdom had rest under him. He built fortified cities in Judah, for the land had rest, and had no war in those years, for the Lord gave him peace. So just a brief summary of Asa's reign here. In the 20th year of Jeroboam, so Jeroboam has been king of Israel for 20 years, Asa becomes king of Judah. And during his reign, it says, in Kings it says they had 10 years of peace, but in Chronicles it said that it doesn't specify 10 years, it just said he took down the altars, he removed the foreign gods, and essentially all the days of his reign they had peace. So there's this kind of question here, is define what peace is? Is there infighting in here? Because these are two different perspectives from two different kingdoms that we're looking at here. So that's one thing that we have to be noting of while we're going through this. But both can agree. The kingdom knew peace. And during this time of peace, what did he do? He was not idle. He turned the kingdom back to God, but then he also built defenses. He built fortified cities in Judah. He was preparing for what he deemed to be inevitable. Attacks from the outside, attacks from Israel, the Philistines, from Assyria. He knew that while there's peace, the only way to preserve your peace is to prepare for war. And that is what his reign shows us. Now, on the opposite side of things, during Asa's reign, we have Nadab. Nadab 15, 25 through 29, which says, Nadab the son of Jeroboam began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. Except there's the issue with the calendar. And if we actually look at the calendars and we actually adjust things, in our modern calendar, it was about the length of a single year. He reigned over 2 years during that calendar, but they weren't full years. And it actually is about a year in our modern calendar. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he made Israel to sin. Baasha, the son of Abijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all of Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha killed him in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. And as soon as he was king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam. He left the house of Jeroboam not one that breathed until he had destroyed it, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servant Abijah the Shilonite. If you remember last time when we were going over this, there was this prophecy that was given against Jeroboam and his house because he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He turned Israel away from God and set up golden calf statues, 2 golden calf altars on the north and south ends of Israel so that they wouldn't have to return to Judah in order to worship at the temple. They could worship other gods at these other temples. And so because of that, we have the fulfillment of that prophecy again as we go through this. And that's the one thing that we constantly keep going back through in this class over and over again. There are prophecies, there are promises made from God, and they end up being fulfilled through history. We see it time and time again, and this is just another instance of it. But now here, so we have Asa, who's king. 3 years into his reign, we have a new king of Israel. Judah. In 2 Chronicles 16, 1 through 6, it says, "In the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah. That is, that he might permit no one to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah." So he builds this fortified city right on the border, trying to essentially threaten Judah. It says, "Then Asa took silver and gold from the treasure house of the Lord and the king's house and sent it to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying, 'There is a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I am sending you silver and gold. Go break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me.' And Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa, and to send commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel. And they conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel-Marim, and all the stone cities of Naphtali. And when Baasha heard of this, he stopped building Ramah and let his work cease. Then King Asa took all Judah, and they carried away all the stones of Ramah and its timber, in which Baasha had been building, and with them he built Geba and Mizpath." So here we have we kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into the politics at this time. War. Country breaks in two, and they're constantly going at each other with this. So Nadab's trying to Baasha, who comes after Nadab, tries to build up the stronghold, but he fails. Because what Asa does is he goes to the king of Syria. So not Assyria or the Assyrians, which are farther off, but Syria, so Damascus, and that northern kingdom that broke away after Solomon's death. And he goes to him and says, "I know you're allies with Israel, but hey, here's some money. Break your alliance and attack him for me, so that way instead of his army and people building this massive stronghold right on my border, he'll have to go deal with you instead." And he goes, "I like money, sure, why not?" So he accepts the gifts, and that's what ends up happening here. And then what does he do when Baasha leaves? He takes all the stone and building materials and everything else that he left, because he left in such a hurry, and then he builds 2 cities for the price of the one stronghold that Baasha was going to make. Now, Baasha, on the other hand, as recorded in 1 Kings So again, the history books from the other side, 1 Kings 15:33 through 34, and then 16:1 through 4, record him as this. In the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, the son of Ahijah, began to reign over all Israel in Tiraz. And he reigned 24 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of Jeroboam and in his sin which he made Israel to sin. And the word of the Lord came to Jehu the son of Hananiah against Baasha, saying, Since I exalted you out of the dust and made you leader over my people Israel, you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have made my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger with their sins. Behold, I will utterly sweep away Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone of his who dies in the field, the birds of the heavens shall eat. So God prophesies the exact same thing here. He gives the prophecy the exact same promises to Jeroboam. Your entire house will be annihilated, and they will be food for dogs and birds. They will not have proper burials. They will not know rest or peace. And in this, we see a very quick turnaround of this promise, because Israel during this time has its own thing. In Roman history, we all know the sort of the year of 5 emperors or 4 emperors, where in a single year, emperors just kept assassinating their predecessor and taking the throne. So it was a very unstable time. Well, here in Israel, we have 3 kings in 3 years. A very unstable period of Israel where everybody's trying to take the throne. And you'll see here in 1 Kings, and there's a few instances of this. So 1 Kings 16, beginning at verse 8, in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel in Tiraz, and he reigned 2 years. Again, calendar difference. It's actually more like 1 year. But his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. When he was at Tiraz, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, who was over the house of Tiraz, Zimri came in and struck him down and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. When he began to reign, as soon as he seated himself on the throne, he struck down all the house of Baasha. And he did not leave a single male of his relatives or his friends. Thus Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasha, according to the word of the Lord, which was spoken against Baasha by Jehu the prophet. For all the sins of Baasha and for the sins of Elah his son, which they sinned and which they made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their idols. Can't defend himself, and then once he has killed him, he assumes command of the country, and then he kills all of his sons, even anybody who was friends with him, completely destroying, or at least he thinks, destroying anybody who would oppose his new regime. Well, Zimri reigned 7 days in Tiraz. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, and the troops who were encamped heard it, said, Zimri has conspired and he has killed the king. Therefore all Israel made Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that day in the camp. So Omri went up from Gibbethon, and all of Israel with him, and they besieged Tiraz. And when Zimri saw the city was taken, he went out into the citadel of the king's house and burned the king's house over him with fire and died. Because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, for which his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin. So he assassinates the king, takes over the city, kills the entire king's family, and what happens? The other general, who's actually besieging the city, goes, "Oh, you think you can just take the throne? I'm more popular than you are. I have a bigger army than you do. So we're just going to pick up, walk back, and we're going to besiege the capital instead of this Philistine city." So his reign was not measured in years, but 1 week. That's how long the traitor was able to hold command of his kingdom. King 16. Then the people of Israel were divided into two parts. Half the people followed Tabini, the son of Gibnath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. So now you have a year of two kings. So you have two kings simultaneously claiming the throne. And it says, but the people who follow Omri overcame the people who followed Tabini, the son of Ginath. So Tabini died and Omri became king. In the 31st year of Asa, the king of Judah, Omri began to reign over Israel and reigned for 12 years. 6 years he reigned in Tiraz, and he brought the hill of Samaria he bought the hill of Samaria from Shimmer for 2 talents of silver, and he fortified the hill and called the name of the city that he built Samaria, after the name of Shimmer, the owner of the hill. Omri did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did more evil than all who were before him. For he walked in all the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and in the sins that he made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. This is a very common theme when you're reading the book of Kings, describing the kings of Israel, where they all walked in the ways of Jeroboam. I don't know about you, but when you're used as the standard of evil in the Bible, that's a pretty bad reputation to have here. But in this, in the span of about 3 years, we've had almost 4 transitions. We've had 3 transitions of power plus a civil war in the span of 3 years in Israel. All while Asa, the king of Judah, knows peace. And this is actually a pretty common thing when you have a king of Judah who actually follows in the way of the Lord, follows in the way of David, as opposed to follows in the ways of Jeroboam. And this is going to be a consistent comparison we have between the two kingdoms while Judah decides to walk in the ways of Jeroboam instead of the ways of David, but that's later on. Now, in this, one last note on Omri before we continue. We know, which is the hill of Samaria, and he builds a fortification on it. This is the beginning of the city of Samaria, which would be the capital of Israel and the sort of stronghold that the kings will use moving forward in their history. Which is why when you talk about the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan comes from Samaria, which is Israel. So when we have the story, it's like, oh yeah, it's the Good Samaritan. This is what they're talking about. You're talking to a southern Judah audience, and it's like, oh yeah, there's a Good Samaritan who actually gave of himself and he did these things. Oh, but he's a Samaritan. He's from the northern kingdom. They're evil. They're horrible. They go after other gods and things like that. That's the context in which they have here. But that's where the name is derived from, is the kingdom of Israel, or the kingdom of Samaria, comes from the capital of Samaria, the city that the kings reign in. But now moving on. So we have the last days of Asa. So he reigned for a very long time, actually longer than David and Solomon as well. And it says here, the Lord brought war upon Asa because he did not trust him to deal with Baasha and went to Syria. So the very beginning, the first 10 years of his reign, they know peace. That's what it said earlier in Kings. But then, because of his political maneuverings that he did, because he did not rely upon the Lord to deliver him from Baasha building this stronghold right on his border, and instead he went to the king of Syria saying, hey, please help, then the Lord brings war to Asa and Judah. And it said, so he did not know peace the last 7 years of his life. So the last 7 years of Asa's reign, Judah is at war, or in a state of war. And in 1 Kings 16:29, it says, in the 38th year of Asa, the king of Judah, Ahab, the son of Omri, began to reign over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. That's probably one of the most famous kings that we know of, Ahab. And that's primarily because he's the one that Elijah goes and butts heads with constantly. But we will be getting to that in a moment. So we have Asa and Omri. Omri dies during Asa's reign. So now we have Ahab in Israel, and now Asa is towards the end of his reign. Now, I'm sorry about that. I mixed up my notes, that's why. I'm like, I thought I already covered that already, because I did. So, now moving on to the end of Asa's reign here. So the last, moving towards the last days of Asa. There we go. So the last days of Asa that we have here. So the Lord brought war upon him. He reigned, and now we have Asa and Ahab. So this is the point at which we're here. So Asa and Ahab. Because Asa did not rely upon the Lord to help him with Baasha, he would have wars the last years of his life, so the last 7 years. And in 2 Chronicles 16, beginning at verse 12, it says, in the 39th year of his reign, Asa was diseased in his feet, and his disease became severe. Yet even in his disease he did not seek the Lord, but sought help from physicians. And Asa slept with his fathers, dying in the 41st year of his reign. So which means, because 41 years... we can actually condense that down. That is approximately the 40 years which they say that both David and Solomon and Saul all reigned during their time. So pretty standard length of a reign for a king. But now we have Ahab, who comes onto the scene in this. So Ahab, 1 Kings 16:29 says, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah. So about 3 years before Asa dies, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel, and Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. So that city that the fortification that his father built, the city that he began, is now the new capital. It is the capital for Ahab. And of course, we kind of know the story of Ahab. He marries Jezebel, worships Baal, and builds a temple in Samaria to Baal. That's kind of what Ahab is known for. And then, just a little side footnote, stepping away from the kings here real quick. There's another prophecy that kind of comes to fruition during this time. In 1 Kings 16, verse 34, it talks about the rebuilding of the city of Jericho. It says, in his days, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of Ibram, his firstborn. He set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. Which, if we go back to Joshua 6:26, it says, Joshua laid an oath on them at that time, saying, cursed before the Lord be the man who raises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn he shall lay its foundations, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates. This was a prophecy that was put to, let's see, because this is during Ahab's reign. So this is approximately 250, 300 years or so after the Israelites coming in the time of Joshua. So even over multiple centuries, we see the prophecies spoken then come to fruition in this. We see the promises that God laid before, for good or for ill, always come around and always hold truth through this. So at that point, that's the last one we're going to talk about today. We've gotten to Ahab in this. Next time, we are going to be trying to do a little bit more of a survey. We've been getting kind of into this because we're dealing with some very historical figures and very important figures in the history. So Ahab is one of the most noteworthy kings, as of course of Jeroboam. Asa is also one of the more important kings of Judah in this. But going forward, we're going to be going from Abraham, and we're kind of going to be speed running a little bit all the way to when Assyria, well, Babylon, which then turns into Assyria, comes in and wipes the northern tribes from the face of history, because afterwards we hear nothing of them. It just becomes the kingdom of Judah at that point. But thank you all for coming in and joining us again this week for our history lesson, and I'll just pray before we depart. Our gracious Lord and Heavenly Father, we ask that you be with us throughout the rest of this day, moving into this week. Give us traveling mercies as we go upon our homeward way, and please be with those of us who are either ill or injured. We ask your healing hand upon them, and we ask that you please continue to be with us as we continue to gather here as a community of believers, and then during this class, as we are able to look at the history of your people, and time again, we see that your word holds true. Your promises through the prophets and the prophecies are always met and always fulfilled in their own time according to your will. We ask that you continue to be with us. Please be with us, whether we make the pages of history or remain a little footnote in it. We ask all this in your dear Son, gracious and precious name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you, and we will see you later.